That's no moon. It's a space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Just a few quick things before we get started. Our conference is like 30 days away? I mean, it's a month away, right around the corner. Rebels of Disclosure 2025. It's our 4th annual conference in Grafton, Illinois. And there are tickets still available if you would like to join us. JourneyToTruth.online has all that information. We have 4-day passes, 1-day passes if you can't make it the whole time. And after the conference on the very last day, Friday the 16th, we are doing a field trip to Cahokia Mounds, which is a pyramid site in North America. Technically a mound site, but it still very much represents the same energy and technology as the Great Pyramids do. And it's a lot of fun, and we're expecting some major activations this year because we just got back from Egypt and we're going to be bringing that energy to the mounds, and we couldn't be happier and more excited to share that experience with you guys. So if you'd like to join us, JourneyToTruth.online has all that information. And if you can't make it in person, we have live stream virtual passes available that do include a replay and a 6-month downloadable replay. So again, JourneyToTruth.online. We would love to see you there. It's right around the corner. Today's guest is Peter Fuller. He is an author, and actually I'm going to read his bio. I never read anyone's bio, but I am going to read a portion of his bio just because I find it very interesting. Peter Fuller worked in the Military History Department of the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, Alberta, Canada for 8 years. He has studied military history for decades, written numerous articles, and lectured at major museums and universities on the subject of military history. And it goes on and on. But the reason I find that very interesting and important is because he is the author of a 6-book series. Only 4 books are out, but a 6-book series titled Solar Warden, which is the Naval Space Command, Navy Secret Space Program. And I'm very interested to pick his brain on what inspired him to write these books, because being a military historian, obviously he must have come across some evidence to support the claim of a Solar Warden secret space program. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited.
Great to have you.
We're excited to have you here. So I know I kind of just read through your bio, but maybe you could do a little better job than I did explaining who you are, how you got into this, and what inspired you to even start writing these books.
Okay. I've always been fascinated by UFOs, even at a very young age. And, I read as many books as I could find on the subject growing up. I had a couple of experiences of my own with UFOs, and I'll get into that a little later. I have also been fascinated by military history, and so I've studied that as well. It's been a kind of a lifelong sort of journey for me. But what really got me started with the secret space program is, I guess, when was this? This was probably about 10 years ago. There was a television show on called The Conspiracy Show, and the host was Richard Serrett, and you can find this online. One of the episodes that he did on his show was titled The Secret Space Program. And I mean, he had some pretty heavy hitters on the show that he was interviewing. There's Michael Schratt, there was Thomas Valone, there was Richard Dolan, Paul Harris. He interviewed all of them, and they had a lot to say about the fact that there was secret technology that was being used by the government in black programs, and that just kind of piqued my interest. And then I would say probably about 10 years ago, I have a friend in the U.S., and he asked me not to use his name, but his father was, I guess, what you would call a forensic accountant. And he worked for the U.S. Army, and he had the highest top secret access. So he could walk onto any U.S. military base anywhere in the world, and they would have to not only open their doors to him, but they would have to open their books to him. And so he did forensic accounting to try and find out where the money was going. And interesting thing. Now, I know this is hearsay. However, my friend is legitimate, and I can vouch for him. But he said after his dad retired, there was one night when him and his dad and his three brothers were sitting out on the porch after supper, and Dad had a couple of beers and it kind of loosened his tongue a little bit, and he started telling his boys about some of the things that he saw through his forensic accounting. One of those things was that in the mid 1960s, now focus on the date for a second. He discovered that the military had developed an electromagnetic shield, like on Star Trek, shields up. And what they did was they were testing it. And he said that they had a tank and they had it protected by this electromagnetic shield. And he said they fired pretty much every conventional weapon at this thing, and it stopped every single one of them. Now, how I know that this is not just a story that Dad was telling after a few beers is because of some of the things that he said. First of all, he said that the shield generator was almost as large as the tank, and it had to be hauled in a trailer behind the tank. The next thing he said even though it protected the tank against all of the conventional weapons that they had, they couldn't figure out how to get the shield extended underneath the tank. So it could literally be taken out by a simple landmine. And I started thinking, okay, this is in the mid 1960s. This is all analog technology. What do you think they have now, some 60 years later? And not only that, but if you took that same shield generator and you mounted it in an aircraft or a spacecraft, it would create an entire 360-degree bubble of protection. Another thing that he said that his dad told him was in the mid-1960s again, the military had developed a ray gun, a functional ray gun, like Star Trek's phasers. He said that the only problem with it was that a single unit would cost over $1 million in 1965 money. So he said it wasn't practical to be able to manufacture and provide for ground troops or whatever. But think about this. While Captain Kirk was firing his phaser on television in the mid-1960s, the Army already had a version of that was functional, even though it was super expensive. And so finally, Dad said, "You know what?" He says, "I've said enough. I shouldn't be telling you guys this." Even though he was retired, that he still had he was still bound by a non-disclosure agreement. But of course, his boys are going, "No, Dad, tell us more. Tell us more." And my friend, after his dad died, my friend found in his mom's basement a block of steel that was about 3/4 of an inch thick. And it was like maybe 12 inches square. In the center of it was a hole. And along the edge of the hole were these little blobs of metal that look like, I'm sure that you've all seen the slow motion where they drop the water into, or they drop a droplet of water into a container of water. And in slow motion, you get all of these little nodules that kind of rise up as the droplet of water hits the surface. We said that's what this thing had in steel. So something very, very hot had struck this block of steel and punctured a hole in it, and left these droplets around the perimeter. And he said that he's sure it's in his mom's basement, but he says his mom lives in the northern United States. He lives in the southern United States. He says next time he goes to visit, he's going to check his mom's basement and see if he can find this block of steel, and he's going to send me a photograph. So that what his dad said was that was a test object. They were testing a directed energy weapon, and so these stories that he was telling me, they connected to this conspiracy show about the secret space program and the technology that they were discussing. And then it was 2015. There was a program on television called Hangar One: The UFO Files. Mm-hmm. And one of their episodes was space weapons, which was specifically about Solar Warden. And as I'm watching this program, I'm thinking, wow, that would make an excellent story. So I started writing, and I started doing a lot of research, and combined the two and came up with this series on the secret space program. And I started writing the first book. I only intended to write one book. But when I was finished, the ideas just kept flowing. So I wrote book 2, and then I wrote book 3, and book 4, and now I'm on book 5, and I'm going to try and end it with book 6. So that's kind of where it came from and where I'm at right now.
So, being a military historian, did you actually have a military background? Does that mean that you were in the military, or you just studied
No,
military? Okay.
no, I was never in the military. I worked in the military history department of the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, and I worked there for 8 years. So I kind of sort of got my military grounding there, but never had the honor of serving in the military at all.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. That clarifies things. So, regardless, the fact that you were inspired to write these books after your years of research and,
Mhm.
actually firsthand stories and obvious evidence in your eyes that there's
Right.
something going on as early as the 60s and maybe even before that. Um, I think that holds a lot of weight. It carries a lot of weight whenever you turn that into a story that's, a best-selling series. And I mean, who knows where the true inspiration is coming from? A lot of people say when you start writing, it's like a stream of consciousness, or you're channeling, or you're tapping into, some real information sometimes. So do you think anything like that is occurring when you get these ideas?
Um, I don't think so specifically. When I started doing my research, I discovered a lot of things that led me to the conclusion over time that there is actually a secret space program out there. And not just my friend's dad, but there's a lot of whistleblowers, and there's a lot of people who you know provide what I consider to be solid information with regarding to this. And the thing is there's 2 points I'd like to make about this. Number one, you have to be very careful. You don't believe everything you see or hear,
Mhm.
especially on the internet. And I did a lot of my research on the internet, but I did a lot more through books, through interviews, through videos, that kind of thing, listening to people. So, the internet is filled with misinformation, and there's landmines everywhere,
Mhm.
so to speak, and you have to be very careful. You have to filter that information through other information, and decide, okay, yeah, this guy, I don't necessarily believe what he's saying, but this guy is legitimate, just based on what he said, and the people that he's been in contact with, where he's worked, that kind of thing. And you can find out, where a lot of these people, if they say that they were they worked for this company, or they were in the military. You can find out if that's actually true. You do a little digging and a little searching. Second point I want to make is that people tend to believe what they want to believe.
Mhm.
Okay, so if they want to believe in aliens, it doesn't matter what kind of evidence you provide them with. To the contrary, they they will most times they will just accept the fact that they believe in aliens because they want to believe that they're true, that kind of thing. So you have to come at this whole subject with a very skeptical and a very objective point of view. You have to be prepared to be proven wrong.
Mhm.
And so it's really, and of course, as a researcher, as a writer, I have to filter through all of that.
Right.
And I have to decide, okay, yeah, I can't use this information because I don't think that it's viable. But I can use this information because it's been backed up by 3 or 4 different sources,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So, um, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a very healthy way to approach it. And just an example, I was buying something online recently, and I didn't want to buy it off the Facebook ad because it could be a scam, right? But I
Mhm.
really liked the product. So I went and found the website, and I looked at the website, everything. I mean, it was real, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything wrong with it. And I still got scammed. I mean, it was all I even did my research and still got scammed. So what I'm saying is just because you made a great point, just because you find a website or find something online about it doesn't necessarily you don't know what's actually behind that. So
Yeah.
it could be a smokescreen website, right? But
Yeah.
regardless, I do think, yeah, absolutely, the true research, like what we do, um,
Mhm.
you can read it online, but not until my favorite thing to do is interview the people, meet them, and in some cases, even meet them in person and
Right.
spend time with them and get to know their body language and how they live their life. Like, that's how, like, I like to do my research surrounding this subject because you
Right.
get to know these people and know what kind of person they are, and sometimes they may end up being crazy, and sometimes you're like, "No, this is a stand-up, credible military man that's
Right.
that's telling the truth." And there's a big difference whenever you do that instead of just throwing your arms up saying, "Oh, that's bullshit." With like, you really if you wanna know the truth, you have to go the extra mile is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. And that's what I've tried to do, with my research. You never take anything at face value.
Yeah,
You never, if you can back it up with 2 or 3 other sources, all the better.
mhm,
But, don't just go, "Oh, this is interesting. I'm going to accept this based on this person's, opinion," or whatever.
right.
You have to be more, um, I don't wanna use the word skeptical, but yes, you have to be more skeptical than that.
Right,
And that's
right.
what I've tried to do in my research.
So, okay, we've heard of Solar Warden, heard of, Naval Space Command, Space Force. Are they all connected? Is it all the same thing, different names? Do you have what are your thoughts on that?
I think Solar Warden was founded by Naval Space Command. I think it was founded by the Navy in the 1980s. That's what I've found from various sources. And, but I think that now, I think it's broken away and it's become its own entity. And, somebody that I respect is Richard Dolan. He's a very serious researcher and he knows his stuff. And one of the things that he said about the secret space program and Solar Warden is that they've become what he calls a breakaway civilization. And that was a phrase that he coined in one of his books, UFOs and the what is it? I got it right here. In the national security state, he's written 2 books about that, and he mentions the breakaway civilization. And what that means is that they have become an entity unto themselves, and they're not bound by any other government or earth-bound government uh, departments or whatever you want to call them. So they've actually become a separate civilization,
Mhm.
and so they're not bound by the laws and the rules of any earthbound government. They've become a government unto themselves. So I think that's the sort of the current consensus is that they're even though they were founded by the United States Navy, they're no longer a part of it.
Right.
That's the way I see it, anyhow.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that.
Yeah.
There's these things called black sites,
Yeah,
where you allegedly need like a Q clearance to even access it. That most people don't even know where the funding comes from. Congress,
right.
forget Congress. Nothing has to be passed through them.
Yeah,
It really it's become its own entity. It's
yeah,
a workaround, so they don't have to go get the president's approval, right?
right.
I
Yeah.
mean, they dealt with that issue years ago, probably around
And
the time they were developing that technology. Were you gonna say something, Aaron?
yeah, unacknowledged special access programs.
Right.
And Stephen Greer's been blowing the whistle on that for, I think, 30 plus years now. He's got
Yeah.
documentaries talking about it. There's the whole story about President Eisenhower supposedly found out about Area 51 and the stuff that was going on there. And he just assumes, because why wouldn't he at the time? Oh, I'm the president. I need to know what's going on. I need access to this. I need oversight. He is denied access. He's told this is not in your jurisdiction. He's the
Yeah.
president of the United States. It's happening in the United States. And he's like furious because he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm the president. And he threatens to send the first army out of Colorado to invade the base if they don't let them in. And then they go, okay, we'll show you. And then they give them this BS little. They show them like a few things, and of course they don't show them everything. And he knows that he's not stupid. And then what is the speech he makes after that is beware the military industrial complex and the rise of unwarranted power and influence that gets out of control. Well, that's exactly what's happened since then. It started a little before that and even more so since then. And then but we do have, I think there's different factions, and like you're talking about the Navy, and supposedly the Air Force supposedly has their own as well, and then other countries have their own supposedly as well. And yeah, I think, like you said, at a certain point of technological advancement, they completely become this breakaway civilization that it's like, okay, what are you going to do? Like, we have all this technology and we can travel space. It's like you kind of naturally become broken away from any Earth-based anything at that point.
Yeah. So, no, I agree with you 110%. I think that's exactly what's happened. And, according to my research, Solar Warden has bases on the moon and Mars and possibly further out. And they definitely have the technology to operate in space.
Yeah.
With regards to propulsion systems, weapon systems, the shields. They have cloaking technology. There was I got some notes here. There was a Freedom of Information Act that was initiated by the. Sorry, guys, I'm just looking for this.
No, take your time. You're good.
That was initiated by Senator McCain, and what he got back from the Defense Intelligence Agency was, it would blow your mind. There's a list of technologies here that they're currently working on, and I just highlighted a few. There's invisibility cloaking, so they're working on a cloaking device. Now you have to understand that. Based on my research, Solar Warden is probably about 50 or 60 years ahead of any current technology we have here on Earth, and that was confirmed by Ben Rich, and his Skunk Works, his Lockheed Skunk Works. He said at a seminar at UCLA at his alma mater, he said, he says we have things in the desert, and he meant Area 51, that are 50 years beyond anything you can imagine. So if you've seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, he says, we've already been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort.
Right.
Wow. To make a statement like that. But this list of Defense Intelligence Agency research projects, invisibility cloaking, traversable wormholes, role of superconductors in gravity research, concepts for extracting energy from the quantum vacuum, that's zero-point energy. You saw that a lot on Stargate SG-1. Magnetohydrodynamics, which is a form of anti-gravity propulsion, quantum computing and utilizing organic molecules in automation technology, quantum tomography of negative energy states in the vacuum, ultracapacitors as energy and power storage devices, state-of-the-art and evolution of high-energy laser weapons. That's directed energy weapons. So these are all projects that the DIA is currently working on, and so if they're working on that and they're actually developing these things, well, Solar Warden's 50 years ahead of them. So, imagine what they already have.
Right.
You know?
Where did that list come from again?
It was from Senator John McCain. He did an Access of Information Act request. I can email you this stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to just take a closer.
Great.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I'll send that to you for sure. And then another one I've got here. This is really interesting, and I implemented this in my novels. This is from a Livermore physicist who is working for the secret space program, and he did an interview through a project called Project Camelot. And he says, this may interest you if you have a physics background. You know what signal non-locality is? when two particles in different parts of the universe can apparently communicate with each other simultaneously, no matter the distance. This is subatomic physics, and it's talking about non-locality. It says communications devices have been made for communicating across vast distances and also locally using a methodology that's impossible to eavesdrop on because there's nothing traveling between the two devices that can be intercepted. It's impossible to crack or code break or eavesdrop because no signal travels anywhere. So there's no signal to be intercepted or decoded. It just doesn't work like that. The beauty of it is that the devices are actually so simple to build, you can create two chaotic circuits in a couple of small breadboards using cheap components which anyone can buy, and they communicate with each other in this way. You can build these if you know how. The thing is this is a communication system where if I'm in the Milky Way galaxy and you're in the Andromeda galaxy, we can communicate with each other just like we're doing now.
Right.
You know, like in Star Trek, they have their subspace radio or whatever. And I remember there was one episode where they were up against the Romulans, and Captain Kirk says to the Romulan commander, he says, you know, I've already advised Starfleet of our situation. And the Romulan commander smiles and says, yeah, but it'll take 3 weeks for the subspace message to get to Starfleet. Well, this type of communication is instantaneous because it's using this subatomic condition, right?
Right.
So that was great for my novels because I didn't have to worry about the message taking 3 weeks to get back to home base when they're way out in space somewhere.
Right.
They communicate instantly. Well, this is real. You know, it's not like this is fantasy. I mean, I'm writing science fiction, but a lot of what I have, what I'm incorporating into my novels, I believe is science fact. You know, so I think that makes it a little more interesting.
It absolutely does. And you know, what you just described was quantum entanglement. And
yeah, exactly.
And the technology on that list, maybe you could read it again. The quantum technology. Sure. What was it? That solves that problem. If they've developed that's your quantum entanglement right there.
Exactly. You want me to read the list again?
No, just the quantum. I don't remember. You listed them all. Something that had quantum and you had highlighted it.
Yeah. Space communication implications of quantum entanglement and non-locality. And this project is being led by Dr. Jay Kramer at the University of Washington. So,
when did McCain put in the request for that Freedom of Information Act?
The cover letter I've got here, I'll put it in front of the camera. It's dated January 9th, 2018.
Okay, so
that's almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, but still recent in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely. So you know, they're working on these projects in 2018. So, you know, I'm confident that a lot of them have been completed by 2025 and probably implemented.
So I think the reason that might be all part of what they call the movie or the show, right? They release that information, the whole list of technologies, as a way to like slowly roll it out and create this narrative for the public, when in fact all of that's been perfected in the programs, right?
Yeah,
in the 80s potentially, and or maybe, you know, over the years. But regardless, it's happening, and I think this is all part of a way to slowly bring it out in a way to be like, to pretend like we're just now discovering this stuff, so they can maintain that narrative, maintain that illusion.
Yeah, and that is exactly true, because Lockheed Skunk Works, when they're working on their projects, like what they're working on right now, nobody knows. But when they developed the F-117, the stealth fighter, they had that fully operational back in the 80s when President Reagan sent 2 F-16s in to destroy Muammar Gaddafi's house after he had been bombing people like Americans in Europe and the Middle East. The F-117s were ready. They were functional. They could have flown in that mission, but the powers that be decided they didn't want the world to know that the F-117 existed yet.
Right.
And it wasn't until they were almost obsolete that they released them to the public, and they started using them in in their military missions. And I think that that's the way they work. They've got this stuff that they're working on now, but they don't want anybody to know about it. And that's why, people say, why don't they bring this stuff out into the public? Well, if you've got anti-gravity propulsion technology, field propulsion technology, would you really want to release it to the public so that the Chinese could get a hold of it, or the Russians could get a hold of it? You don't want your enemies to be able to have this same technology. That was the problem at the end of World War II with the development of the A-bomb. America was the only country that had the A-bomb. And I've got the guy's name here somewhere. He was working on the Manhattan Project, and he decided that, you know what, no one nation should have this technology. So he leaked it to the Russians. That's how the Russians got nuclear technology, right? And then we had the Cold War. We had MAD, mutually agreed destruction. But if the United States would have retained that technology, then you wouldn't have had all of that. So, I can understand their justification for not wanting to release this technology to the public realm.
And there's
Because-
there's a shadow war taking place amongst all these private corporations anyway. That it's not just like one person has all the answers, right? They don't have all the technology, so there's a
Right.
war amongst themselves. There's a lot of infighting. So it's not like anyone actually has the permission to release this stuff. There's a lot of gray area, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where does Space Force come in here? Do you think Space Force is Solar Warden rebranded, and they're just maintaining that illusion on the surface? What do you think's going on there?
I think, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I can't prove this either way. I think that a lot of these programs are smoke screens.
Right.
And I think that they put them out into the public, like the Space Force. Okay, we've got this Space Force. But what they're doing is we're doing this thing over here, and we don't want people to look at this, so we're going to do something else over here, and we'll get the people to look at this, and that way we can operate without too much scrutiny, because the people are busy looking at this. It's like a magic trick, where it's what's the phrase?
Sleight of hand.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, sleight of hand.
It's like,
yeah.
this already is the Space Force. That's all you need to look at. Meanwhile, like I said, they're doing the real stuff over here, and no one's looking at that.
Yeah. And that's what, in my research, that's what I discovered, that a lot of people believe NASA was. NASA was just a smoke screen while people were watching NASA rockets going up in the air over here. Then over here, they had the TR-3B and they had the anti-gravity technology.
The real stuff's going on over here. And then oh, no, this is all we have is rockets. And then, we can't go back to the moon because we lost the technology or whatever, like ridiculous.
or we
what?
lost the funding.
In 1969, we could do it, but now we have computers, everyone in the world that fits in your pocket, and we can't do it anymore because that makes sense. No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and I think SpaceX plays the same. It's like an extension of NASA in some regard. Like, I don't know. And I believe a lot of the money that's put into NASA and SpaceX and the rocket program is just funneled into the breakaway civilizations. And, so there's always, you have to follow the money. That's why that military or that accountant you were talking about earlier, that's like a great place to start whenever you're doing this research, is follow where the money goes. And a lot of times it ends up in the abyss. You don't know where it's going past a certain wall,
Yeah. Well, case in point, September 10th, 2001, the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld announced that there was $2.3 trillion in his department that was missing.
Yep.
And what happened was, of course, the next day 9/11 happened, and they completely forgot about what Rumsfeld said. And then by 2015, it was reported that $21 trillion was missing. and it was all funneled into black projects. So you wonder where Solar Warden gets its financing from? There it is right there.
Right. And, we throw around trillion like it's nothing, but how many zeros are behind that?
A trillion is 1,000 billion. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
most people can't wrap their heads around how much 1 trillion is, let alone 20 something trillion. Like,
Right. So there's 12 zeros after a trillion. So, I mean,
Right.
yeah, that's insane. 10 to the 12th
let's see.
power, scientific notation. But we just
Mhm.
throw that word around without actually, we have no visual for that amount of money.
Yeah.
And it's just uncomprehendable, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Solar Warden is building space carriers that have squadrons of TR-3Bs and they're building bases on the moon and on Mars, where do you think that money's coming from? How much do you think a space carrier would cost based on a conventional Navy aircraft carrier?
Right.
I mean, they're in the billions of dollars.
Right.
Right.
They're working on a new USS Enterprise. It's a super carrier, and I forget how many billions of dollars. I think it's like $2.5 billion or something. So how much do you think a space carrier would cost to construct? It's got to be a phenomenal amount, based, with all the technology that it would contain.
When you say they're working on a new enterprise, is that
Mhm.
publicly, or what are
Yeah.
you talking about?
It's a new USS Enterprise because the last USS Enterprise was decommissioned, and so they're building a new one, and it's a super carrier. It's
Who's who's building it?
the Navy, the United States Navy.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the next carrier that's being constructed. I think they just launched one here a little while ago, and they're I forget what the class is, but anyhow, they're big.
Right.
And you park one of those off the shore of a country and they start to sweat.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, we're all kind of a lot of, I'll use UFO Twitter or X now as an example. A lot of these people are like relying, they're waiting on the government and these UAP hearings and the official disclosure, right? But these
Mhm.
government approved whistleblowers aren't necessarily going to give us the truth, right? We're going to make the
Yeah.
small doses of it. But I think what's happened is disclosure has already happened, and the information's readily available if you know where to look.
Yeah.
And even patents and things like you've brought to the table can prove it. And you can't argue some of this information, like the patent for the inertial mass reduction device. It's an operable
Yeah.
patent put out by the Navy that reduces the mass of the object, the craft, as it reaches the speed of light. Therefore, it can travel faster than the speed of light. And
Exactly.
it's engineered into the hull of the craft. But guess what? That patent was actually just a refined patent that was put out by Nikola Tesla decades
Yeah.
earlier. So, we're talking about stuff like Tesla might be the brain, the mastermind behind all this, right?
Exactly. Yeah. He was really dealt a bad set of cards. I mean, he was up against. I'm sorry, my brain's just not functioning today.
He was up
He
against
was
Edison.
Edison. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. Because Edison had lots of money and he had lots of backing, whereas Tesla always had his cap in his hand. He was a foreigner. But the thing is, if people would have paid attention to Tesla, he came up with alternating current, which our entire culture, our entire civilization works on today.
Right.
Whereas Edison was pushing direct current, and direct current just didn't work. And then Tesla came up with being able to put out electricity in air. He didn't need any wires.
Right. The ether. The
He had
scalar,
these
yeah.
huge towers, right? And they put out electricity and they would power everything within a certain radius. And his dream was to have these towers around the world that would provide free energy. But of course, the powers that be said, no, we don't want to do that. We need to make money off of this.
Can't control it,
So-
can't make money off of it. Right. Didn't want
Yeah, exactly. exactly. And so they shut him down. And he was developing a device that could collect 0 point energy. He called it energy from the ether.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
the thing is that space is not just a vacuum. It contains a lot of energy. And who was it? John Lear, I think, who came up with the formula that 1 cubic meter of empty space out in space contains something like 10 to the 29th power energy. Just that 1 cubic meter of space. And space is vast. And that's what I use in my novels. My TR-3Bs and all of my spacecraft have what I call 0 point collectors.
Mhm.
And what they do is they simply draw energy as they're passing through space. And so they never run out of fuel. There's no chemical thrust involved. And so they can go on indefinitely. And just on that particular note, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this.
It looks like the stealth bomber.
This is the B-2 stealth bomber,
Yeah.
which apparently uses electrogravitic anti-gravity propulsion along with conventional jet propulsion. But what it does is it positively charges the leading edge of the aircraft, and then negatively charges the exhaust that comes out of the jet engines, and this produces an anti-gravity propulsion.
So it
So
actually.
this
Go ahead.
this vehicle can fly indefinitely. Once it gets up to cruising speed, it kicks in the anti-gravity propulsion system, and it can go forever, basically.
It's essentially displacing in the front and replacing in the back, and it's more or less being pulled through space instead of propelled.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's why. And it's like it's a perpetual motion machine.
Yeah.
It can never run out of energy.
Yeah, exactly. So this is current technology. This is what the U.S. Air Force is using, and which when you think about it is pretty fascinating. They're using two types of propulsion: conventional, and then the electrogravitic systems.
Right.
Now, this is a book. If you're interested in anti-gravity, okay, I'll get this in front of the camera. This is a book you need to buy. It's by a physicist named Paul LaViolette. And it's a fascinating book. But in order to read it and get anything out of it, you got to have a bit of a science background because he goes into some serious details and some serious formulas. But I want to read something here that I think is very interesting.
Yeah.
He says on October 2007, I heard from a reliable U.S. government source that Boeing recently completed a classified electrogravitics propulsion project for the military that had certain novel features. The technology works so well that they felt it could be of fantastic benefit if used on their commercial jet airliners. They reportedly applied for declassification of their invention for commercial use, but they were denied permission. Okay, so the Air Force said, nope, this is for us only.
Right.
So the technology is out there. I mean, there's no disputing that. But again, it's being limited by, the military-industrial complex, whatever you want to call them.
That's what
the agencies. Go ahead.
That's the private sector is a good word.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the propulsion or repulsion technology, right? But there, you mentioned earlier in that list of technologies, traversable wormholes. Okay, that we're talking about something entirely different now, which is we're getting into the cosmic web, which some people say that there's a mycelium network in space, even in our atmosphere, and that's what we see. We see it whenever the lightning follows those threads, right?
Right.
It's like the mycelium network on the ground, but it's also in space. Well, information data can travel through that web, but what can also travel through that web, if it's big enough, is craft and people. And that's what we had. That's what a traversable wormhole is. And maybe maybe there has to be a specific astronomical alignment for a wormhole to open, or maybe they're there all the time, or maybe they've built a technology to identify them. And, whatever the case is, or maybe they've made man-made traversable wormholes that don't need the natural mycelium network. So there's many other ways aside from needing the traditional craft to get from point A to point B, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are several other elements that can be utilized that are not conventional spacecraft, and to the point where you can be in a spacecraft in space, and you can open this wormhole. And the thing about a wormhole is it's instantaneous. You
Right.
go in one side and you're out the other side. There's no, like on Stargate SG-1 where you go through that
Tunnel.
tube of light kind of thing, and it takes a while. From what I've found in my research is it's instantaneous. So when you stick your foot through the wormhole, it's already on the other side.
Right. Yeah.
There's no lag or anything like that. So you can take a spacecraft and fly it through a wormhole, and you're instantly on the other side of the galaxy.
Right.
And that's the real kind of space travel that needs to be developed. Instead of this, okay, it's going to take us 3 weeks to get to Alpha Centauri.
Right.
Well, no, you can be there right now. You just open a wormhole and you're there.
And I
So,
think I think that is the case. I mean, we're already doing it with communication, quantum entanglement, or what Einstein
Exactly.
called spooky action at a distance. If
Yeah,
they
I
can
like
do it, if they can do it with our communication, I mean, they can do it with a craft too. I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
thing. They're already announcing on the mainstream articles that they're teleporting things through with quantum computers now. Small
Yeah.
objects, but they're telling you they can do it. And that, like you said, 60 years ago has been done in these programs. So who
Yeah.
knows where we are today?
Yeah, and that's the thing that boggles my mind is like, when my buddy told me, about his dad's story, about the electromagnetic shields and the phasers, or whatever you want to call them, and there were other things that he mentioned. That was back in 1965. So what do you think they've got now?
Right.
And that, like I said, was analog technology. We have digital technology now, and they probably have some other form of technology that's no longer that has made digital technology outdated.
Right.
So I mean, it's like Ben Rich said, I mean, if you can think about it, we've already been there and done that.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
The concept of a breakaway civilization of humans on another planet is so foreign to some people who are still trying to wrap their head around aliens or life elsewhere in the galaxy, And
yeah,
I think that's going to be the big aha moment, or whatever you want to call it, when people understand that humans are out there.
hmm
You're gonna go to another planet, and there's gonna be a fire truck, and there's gonna
yeah,
this exactly something you would find on Earth, to where if you teleported there in your sleep, you might not know that you're not on Earth, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like climbing a mountain, and when you finally get to and you think that you're the first one, but then you get to the top and you find out that there's somebody else already there.
Yeah, there's
I
already
mean,
Right.
not just somebody else, an entire base camp, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's like Elon Musk wants to establish a base on Mars. Well, in my research, I'm pretty sure there's already a base there.
Right. I
Yep.
agree.
So
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's part of, I think there's always going to be this public dog and pony show when we
mhm,
just get to Mars and we're establishing a colony and all this stuff. And that happens, right? And we're going to get there in 3 weeks or however long it takes.
mhm,
That's always going to be the case for some people, depending on their consensus reality and what they believe in. And then there's going
yeah,
to be all these people over here in their own little pocket reality that already know about this stuff, and they're we're going to be so far beyond that. I don't know what that split's going to look like, but it's really apparent that that's the case.
yeah, yeah. And they arrive on Mars and they're basically living in tents.
Right.
Like very simplistic technology. When just over the rise, there's a full base there that has all of the technology that you could imagine that makes living on Mars that much more comfortable.
Right.
I wouldn't want to go with Elon Musk to establish his base because his technology is conventional, and it's not going to cut it as far as I'm concerned. I feel sorry for those people.
Right.
You
Yeah, it's interesting to watch all that play out. Aaron, did you have any questions for him?
No, this has been fascinating.
Right. So going back to your books, the premise of the first book, maybe you can run us through like what that storyline looks like, because did you evolve? I mean, did you write this story based on something that could really happen in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. The thing about my Solar Warden novels is they take place in the present, whereas most science fiction takes place in the far future or in a galaxy far, far away. I mean, Solar Warden in my novels is the here and now. And the premise of the first book is there's this F-16 pilot, and he's an ace. He crashes. He actually progresses to an F-35, and he's flying out of Bagram in Afghanistan, and he encounters two UFOs that are fighting, and one is alien and one is human. And what I found in most UFO encounters, if the UFO gets close enough to your vehicle, it will shut down. The magnetic field just shuts down everything on your vehicle. So the engine stops, the radio stops, and you just kind of coast off to the side. And that happens to him when they do a quick flyby. It knocks out all the systems in his F-35, and his F-35 crashes. He parachutes out. He ejects and he parachutes out, but he's injured in his landing. And so he's laying on the ground in northern Afghanistan, thinking that the Taliban are going to find him and execute him. And he's laying there looking up at the stars, thinking, okay, this is it, when he sees this black triangle approach and hover over top of him. And he passes out, and then he wakes up on one of these Solar Warden carriers called the Nautilus. And so the CAG of the carrier and the captain, they discussed the possibility of folding him into Solar Warden because he's such a good pilot, and they could use a good pilot. At this point, they're losing their battle against the reptilians and the Greys, and so they're looking for anything that they can find to give them an upper hand. And initially, he wakes up, and they explain to him where he is, and he doesn't really believe it until they take him to a viewing port, and they're in orbit, cloaked in orbit over the Earth. And then he realizes that what they said was true. But they ask him if he would like to join the program, and he says, no, take me home. And then in the meantime, they head towards Mars, and they're attacked, and he witnesses an alien attack, and he decides, you know what, I got to do something about this. And so then he asks if he can join the program. Now, this is good in the sense that he doesn't know anything about Solar Warden, so he's got a million questions.
Right.
So he's asking questions for the reader, and the answers, of course, explain everything. And so he's acting as the go-between for the reader and what's going on, and the answers that they give are, of course, the answers that the reader's looking for. And so that's how I approached it. And of course, he learns as he's going along. There are struggles, there are difficulties, there are what we call in writing pinch points. But he gets his space legs, and he gets qualified to fly the TR-3B, the Black Triangle, and so he goes from there. And that's basically the premise of the first book. Of course, he meets this woman named Major Sandy Cooper, and by the end of the book, they fall in love. So there's a bit of a love story mixed in with all of this. And I've actually had readers tell me that they're in love with Sandy Cooper.
You know,
Go figure.
I mean, it sounds like a true story to me. It sounds like something that absolutely could happen, is what I'm trying to say. Like that.
Yeah. And that's how I wrote it.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote it that way so that it wasn't so far fetched that you you drop out of the story, or it loses its credibility. I tried to make it as believable based on the research that I did.
Yeah,
as believable as possible. So.
And you mentioned something in there, the battle between the Greys and reptilians, or against the Greys and reptilians. And that reminds me, I wanted to ask you earlier, have you found any evidence in your research that supports the claim that the government is working with extraterrestrials. There's a joint ET government faction that is maybe part of Solar Warden.
I have in my 4th book, I introduced the Cabal, and they are basically Eisenhower's military-industrial complex. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but in book 4, there are factions of the Cabal that are working with the reptilians and the Greys. So, and there's such a thing as what's called a MILAB, which is a military abduction.
Right.
There have been people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, and while they're being experimented on, in the periphery of the room, they can see people in military uniforms.
Right.
So there's some form of collaboration going on.
Yeah. That answered my
we know
question.
all about that.
Yeah. I mean, I agree
What's
with
that?
that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Aaron, what did you say?
So we know all about that.
Oh, do you? Okay. Okay.
Oh yeah, Tyler and we've researched a lot about that.
As far
Yeah,
as we definitely have found supporting evidence that something like
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, we're not. Well,
Yeah.
Tyler, you have your own experiences, but
Right.
it's kind of a different thing.
Yeah, I think that's very fascinating. But what about a benevolent faction of extraterrestrials assisting our military in a Solar Warden? Like, have you?
Yeah, in books, that's book 4. There is a benevolent faction that begins to work with Solar Warden and gets them out of a lot of trouble. So yeah, I do have that element.
Right.
And we've talked previously about time travel. I have time travel in book 2 and book 3. That element is in there as well. So I try and draw in as much as I can find through my research. There's not a lot that I've discovered. And I mean, my research has taken me in every single direction, 360 degrees. And so I try and work in as much as I can based on the research that I've done. So, as you're reading it, anybody who's familiar with the UFO community and the UFO phenomenon, as they're reading my book, they're going to go, "Oh yeah, okay, he's got that in here. Yeah, that's good. Oh yeah, he's got that. Yeah." So
Right.
that's what I tried to do is try and make it so that somebody who is familiar with the concept of the secret space program and even broadly the UFO phenomenon, they'll find a lot in there that's familiar to them.
Right.
And I think that makes the book more enjoyable too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I love the way you've approached it. I mean, it sounds pretty incredible, and I think people will enjoy it. Are your books primarily just on Amazon? Is that the best way to get them?
Yeah, Amazon. You can go to the publisher, directly to the publisher. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Books A Million. It's on just about every platform that there is for book sales.
Right.
So you can find it on Kobo. You can find, if you're into ebooks, yeah, it's all you got to do is go to those websites and just type in Solar Warden Peter Fuller, and it'll take you right to my books. So
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I find it very fascinating that, you started off as a military historian and here you are writing these quote sci-fi novels, but I think there's a real truth to a lot of what we're talking about today. So,
yeah.
that being said, have you had any of your own personal encounters, extraterrestrials, UFOs? I mean, anything
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that you would
I've had it. Go ahead.
anything you would like to share?
Sure, I'm happy to. My first encounter was when I was about 12 years old. I lived in British Columbia at the time, and our house was across the street was a forest, and it went on forever. And so me and my about 4 of my buddies one summer night, we decided we were going to sleep out under the stars. We didn't have any tents. We were basically bivouacking. And so we went out into the forest. We found a clearing. We tossed our sleeping bags on the ground and we got inside and stared up at the sky. And this was early 1970s. So there wasn't a lot of light pollution. And I mean, the star field was amazing. And so we're just chatting away and it's like midnight or whatever. And we're staring up at the stars. And I noticed off to my left in the sky, a star started to move. Now, it didn't come over the horizon. Okay. It was stationary. And then it started to move across the sky. And I said, guys, look. And I pointed, and they looked, and this thing moved very slowly. Of course, it was probably traveling very fast, because it went from the left side of the sky to the right side of the sky, not quite to the horizon, didn't go over the horizon. And then it just stopped. So it wasn't a satellite. We couldn't figure out what it was. Like, why would something like that, go from one side of the night sky to the other side of the night sky? It didn't make any sense to us, but it got us pretty scared, because we had no idea what it was. And when at that age, I was interested quite a bit in the UFO phenomenon, and I bought several books and read accounts by different UFO enthusiasts or researchers or whatever. The movie with about the couple that was abducted, Betty and Barney Hill. They made a movie with James Earl Jones, and man, I was just glued to the TV. I mean, this was just amazing, right?
Right.
And then many years later, my wife and I went to Cancun, and we were staying in an all-inclusive, and so we walked from our room out into the concourse, and then there was a restaurant that was just a little ways down, and so you had to walk outside for a while to get to the restaurant. So we had dinner. We were on our way back to our room, and this was probably about 9:30 at night. And I looked up into the sky, and I could see what appeared to be an object. I couldn't make out the profile, but it had three lights on it. It had one red light in the center that didn't blink or anything. It was constant. And then it had two green lights on the outer part of it that were flashing. And it wasn't a helicopter, because it was only my estimate was it was only about 1,000 feet off the ground. And you would have been able to hear the chop from the helicopter rotors, but it was perfectly silent. And it was flying in a rectangular pattern, just above and slightly off to the south from us. And it was making 90-degree turns. Well, I don't know if a helicopter can make 90-degree turns. I don't think it can. And this thing was just flying in this rectangular pattern. And we stood there probably for about 15 minutes watching it. And I said, honey, I got to go back and get the camera. And she says, okay, you go, I'll stay here and I'll keep watching it. So I ran back to our room, got the camera. By the time I got back, she goes, it's gone.
Yeah,
So
wow.
we contacted MUFON and let them know, and they did an investigation, and they determined that it was an unknown. It was a UFO. It was a legitimate UFO.
Right.
It wasn't a helicopter or anything like that. And then about 6 months later, when we were at home in Calgary, I stepped out onto the back deck, because it was a beautiful evening, and I just looked up and stared at the stars, and all of a sudden, off in the distance, there was this star that was making funny movements. Like it was a light. It wasn't a star, because stars they're stationary and they move with the rotation of the Earth. But this one was it was kind of flitting around. So I called my wife out again, and I said, what do you make of that? She goes, well, that's not natural. And so I took photographs of that. They weren't very good photographs, but again, I contacted MUFON, and they did an investigation, and they determined that it was not a natural phenomenon, and it was not a man-made phenomenon. So those are my UFO experiences. I haven't met any gray aliens or haven't been abducted. Although I will say, I'll just add this quickly. My wife, in UFO abduction cases, people come back with markings on their bodies. And one of the most common markings is what they call scoop marks, where it looks like somebody's taken a little tiny spoon and just scooped out the skin, although there's still skin there. There's no scab or anything. And I noticed that my wife had a scoop mark on her right shin, about halfway down. And I said, where did you get that? She goes, I don't know. She goes, I've had it for as long as I can remember. And so then I said, okay, is there anything happened in your past that might sound like an abduction experience? And she goes, nothing really. She said, the only thing was when I was 8 years old, she said, I woke up one night and I was floating above my bed. And then she says, and that's all that I remember. I woke up the next morning and that scoop mark was on my shin. So I believe that my wife may have had an abduction experience.
Likely so. Yeah,
Sounds like it.
I would say so. And you know what's interesting about, talking about Mexico and UFO down there, I've been in Mexico a number of times, and one of my best friends was born and raised there. And you go down there and you see the little signs and stuff for aliens and extraterrestrials, and you start talking to people. It's not a conspiracy theory there.
Yeah.
They know they've been seeing them in the skies.
Yeah, of
They were
course.
children. And like I talked to my friend, he's like, "Oh, there's no convincing them. They believe it. They see them, and it's just as normal as seeing airplanes for them."
Yeah.
So it's really interesting when you travel the world and talk to these people. Here you got to convince somebody there. They're like, "Oh yeah," and they have a million stories, and it's like that's just part of our,
Yeah.
you know.
The only
Yeah.
places in the at least the United States like that are when you go to certain towns like Mount Shasta or Sedona or certain towns in Colorado where
Right.
it's like more of a massive spiritual community, and there's the activities off the charts. I've been to those places every night almost. You'll see at least 4 or 5 or more. And it's just like obvious. They're like, oh yeah, we see them all the time. It's
Right.
Yeah.
it's just like we all know they're something unknown at least, or they've had their own experiences, or they think there's ETs going on. But yeah, you go to other countries like Mexico, and it's like way more people believe in this stuff. It's way more accepted. It's interesting.
Right.
And Mexico has a lot of very serious UFO researchers.
Yeah.
And they're not hobbled by, the disbelief that we are in the United States and Canada, and so it's I think that their job there is a lot easier than it is for us,
Right.
because they're not limited by the government trying to hide things and making their research difficult. So
Right.
Yep.
So I guess we'll go ahead and start wrapping this up. I'll ask you one last question. As far as any form of public disclosure, I know we kind of already touched on this, but what's your opinion? What does our future look like as far as ET, UFO disclosure, or even potential disclosure of a secret space program? Do you think it's going to happen, or is they're going to keep the lid on it?
Well, I've discovered that just the regular media will only tell you what they want you to know.
Right.
So when you watch a news program, they're not giving you the whole story. And I think that disclosure is already happening.
Mhm.
It's happening, by dribs and drabs. What they're doing is they're letting go, little tidbits of information. I mean, like the Tic Tac UFOs, right? They captured those on F-18 radar, so what it is the thing is if those are Solar Warden, or if those are secret programs, then I don't think they would have been able to do that. I think they leaked that to let people know, there's something going on here, and all of the experts say we don't know how these things are propelled or who they're from. I think, I've got this expression: is that UFO foreign or domestic? I think they're domestic, right? They're ours,
Right.
and they're kind of showing, see, this is what we can do. And I think that, even Stephen Greer has mentioned this several times, where he says that he believes that the government is releasing information in tidbits. And I don't think that you're going to see the president on the White House lawn come out and say, "Oh, by the way, we have this secret space program, and here's all the information on it." That's not how disclosure is going to happen.
Right.
I think that it's just going to be a little bit at a time, kind of like the F-117. We won't tell anybody we have it, and we can fly it, and and it's fully functional. We'll wait until it's almost obsolete, and then we'll let everybody know about it.
Right.
And I think that may be how they're going to disclose, things like the secret space program. But then again, it comes back to the fact that this is a breakaway civilization, And if they don't want you to know about them, then you're not going to know about them.
Right.
So they have to, there has to be some compliance there with the government.
Now, and I believe you. I agree 100%. And also, I think we're going to get the same type of a rollout with the TR3B. I
Yeah.
think once it's just about obsolete, which it may already be, we'll start seeing it in the sky. But here's the kicker: I think they're going to tell us it's non-spacefaring. Like it's going to have this like
Yeah.
anti-gravitic technology, right? And
Yeah.
whatever story they give us, but they're going to tell us, oh, but it can't go in space or something like that.
Yeah.
And if in the Sands of Times books, they talk about that. They said that the Navy having a TR-3B, and then the Air Force was found out about it late, and then they gave the Air Force a non-spacefaring version of it.
Right.
So if there's any truth to that, I think that's the one that will be released. It's going to look fancy, it's going to do all this stuff, but they're going to say, yeah, but it doesn't go to space yet.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going to be it's the way it's so people can wrap their head around it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a picture of the TR-3B according to Edgar Fouché. Now notice those 3 black dots. Okay.
Right.
Now on here it says it's that black dot is a multimode liquid methane impulse rocket. I don't believe that. This is, and the Nazis were developing flying saucer technology during World War II.
Right.
And that's an established fact.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. There have been books written about it. This is one of their Hanabu flying saucers from World War II. Notice those 3 globes on the underside, right? I believe that those are gyro stabilizers.
Right.
Because I've got a picture here of, and this you can see, you can find this on the internet. This is a very, very famous a photograph. Most researchers believe it's fake. I don't believe it's fake. I think it's legitimate. And the caption underneath is in German. And I have a friend who's a translator. That's what he does for a living. And he translated it for me. And he says the Destra 51, that's what the Germans called this particular flying saucer, is on time in the Vienna suburb with the ordinary weapons issue given. So in other words, it's flying properly. Okay. He says no critical situation resulted. The hunting protection or search and rescue was actually not necessary. So the problem with, and I've got documentation for this, the problem with the German flying saucers is they couldn't establish a consistent anti-gravity field. So these things kept crashing. And so that's what the search and rescue was all about. But this particular one apparently flew as it was supposed to fly and returned to base, RTB, with no problems with the propulsion system. So, the thing is you see these photographs of the German flying saucers, and it appears like they're using similar technology to the TR-3B.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And
Yeah.
and I've heard that those 3 globes are referred to as directional gravitics. They have something to do with which direction the craft goes. So the power source makes it levitate, right? But they need a way to steer it, and that's what those balls do. Potentially, I'm going to share my screen really quick just because I find this. It's perfect time to share it. Let me do this. Find this very fascinating. So you can see this Nazi UFO toy pulled for historical inaccuracy, and it is a Hanabu 2 UFO.
Exactly.
Now, talk about telling you without telling you. Why would you pull a toy from the shelf? You're only drawing attention to yourself, right? It's like the Streisand effect. So I think that, really, it is. And in the description, it says it can fly with a top speed of over 3,700 miles per hour. There's a whole history that comes with the toy, and then all of a sudden it's pulled off the shelf. Well, if it was just a toy, why would you have any need to pull it off the shelf? Unless they're trying to conceal some sort of a truth.
And even this article is so like unnecessarily argumentative about
Look at
the Nazis did not get to space. Nothing to see here, guys.
Right. It literally says no.
Exactly.
It literally says no. The Nazis did not get to space. and
Yeah.
popular mechanics. This.
Okay,
and
now I'm thinking the Nazis definitely got to space.
right. So,
Thanks.
and what's I find even more interesting about this, I remember this happening in real time when it happened. So 2018 was around the time when the secret space program was really getting a lot of attention in the UFO community, right? And
Yep.
it was, I would say that was the height of the secret space program information. And, the whole internet was kind of in a craze about it, or at least this community, right? And
Yeah.
that's the exact time they pulled off the shelf. I mean, talk
Right.
about shooting yourself in the foot.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
This is a book. It's titled Hitler's Flying Saucers, and it documents their entire flying saucer program. And and the thing is that this is not hearsay. This is not conspiracy. They've got documents in here that show the Nazis actually had two flying saucer programs. There was the Vril program, and then there was the Hanabu program. And a guy named Schumann from Munich was in charge of the Vril program, and then a gentleman by the name of Schauberger in Vienna was in charge of the Hanabu program.
Right.
And it's all documented in this book.
And actually, if you want even more historical accuracy, book 6 of the Sands of Time is the interlude in the series, and it is verbatim the diary that was the diary that was written by this German scientist from in the 40s, who essentially passed it on upon his passing. And Sean David Morton released that diary, and it verbatim in its raw form, and it has the entire history of the Vril Flying Saucer program, the Vril Society, and how that even came into effect. And they bring up Robert Schumann, and the only reason he discovered the Schumann resonance is because they built this craft based on the blueprints that the Vril Damen were channeling. They built it, but they powered it on, but they still didn't know where it was drawing its energy from. So that motivated Schumann to start researching, okay, where's this power coming from? And he discovered that the Earth is emanating, it resonates at this frequency, right? It's 7.83 hertz. And that's why he named it the Schumann resonance. But it was all because they were trying to figure out how this UFO was even keeping itself afloat.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is at the end of the Second World War, a lot of those Nazi scientists that were working on these programs were brought over to the United States under Operation Paperclip. And several of them worked on the Manhattan Project. And interesting point, what's his name? The Nazi scientist. He actually founded NASA.
Werner von Braun.
Werner von Braun. He came over. He was a member of the Nazi Party, even though he denied. He said he was forced to join. But I mean, that's up for debate. But anyhow, he was the founder of NASA. He built the Saturn V rockets that the Apollo program used to get the astronauts to the moon, and those were based on his V2 rockets.
Right.
And the thing is, it's interesting because I mean, you got to know where his motivations were. He wasn't a Nazi trying to take over the world. He just loved rockets, and he wanted to build rockets, because after his first V2 rocket launching, it came down, and of course it crashed on the ground. And some reporter, this was during the Second World War, some reporter asked him and said, what do you think of your project? And he goes, well, he says, I'm very happy with it. He says, the only problem is it landed on the wrong planet. He wanted to go to the moon. He wanted to go to Mars. And so, when Eisenhower founded NASA in the late 1950s, he made von Braun the head of the NASA program because of his expertise in rocket technology. So,
I would say it's not just the Sands of Time material that points to this being the case, but I think that there's other material out there as well. Von Braun was sent in to keep Americans thinking that rocket technology was the latest and greatest way to get to space, to keep a lid on the German space program and time travel, which they were also developing just by nature of the crafts themselves and how they traveled. They were also manipulating time, right? And warping time. And if you want a really interesting evidence. Well, you can, maybe not evidence, but the latest Indiana Jones movie, The Dial of Destiny,
Yeah.
the antagonist in that movie is actually Warner von Braun. That's not his name in the movie, but that character was based on Warner von Braun, and
Oh, okay.
the premise of the movie is Indiana Jones and Warner von Braun after this Dial of Destiny, which is a time travel. It's not a time travel device, but it's a way to detect when when and where a shift is going to occur. And
Right.
I'm like, this sounds like they pulled this straight out of the Sands of Time book and turned it into an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
So if anyone hasn't seen that movie, watch it through that lens, and you can be like, oh, they're telling you this is what happened,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the entertainment industry does that a lot. They introduce elements that are factual, but they introduce them as fiction. So, we don't want you to believe this is true, but take a look at this,
Right.
and it's like, okay, I mean, I've done that dozens of times watching movies and television programs. I will see something that I researched and discovered that, I believe that it's accurate and that it's actually in existence.
Right.
And I watched it in a movie or on television and going, yeah, you know what? This may be another form of disclosure. I don't know.
Right.
But that's happened many times.
Yeah, I agree. I
Same.
agree. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for joining us
Yeah,
today.
very
We
fascinating.
could go on and on, but you've clearly done your research, and I encourage everyone to go grab your books. We'll have the link in the description. But yeah, keep it up. I can't wait for book 4 or 5 and 6, I guess.
Five and 6. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, gentlemen, for having me on your podcast. It's been a real honor, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. I don't have a lot of people to talk to, so when I get an opportunity like this, it's such a treat. So
Yeah, well,
thank you again, both of you.
you're in good company, and I don't know where you're located, but you're invited to come out and hang out at our conference in May, if you'd like, in Grafton, Illinois. It's it's you're going to be 200 people there that talking about this stuff. So
Wow.
if you're
Well,
interested,
I'd love to join. I'll look into it definitely.
yeah, absolutely. We'll stay in touch. But yeah, and anyone listening, if you want to come out, we'd love to have you there. JourneyToTruth.online. You can find all that information. It's right around the corner. It's not too late to grab a ticket. Let's go have some fun. And
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you so much, Peter, for joining us. And until next time, everybody, have a great evening. Good night.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to Conference Phone. If you know the name of the conference you'd like to attend, press 1.
Come on.
Using your touch-tone keypad, please enter the first 3 letters of the conference title now. You've selected Secret Space Conference? If that is correct, press 1.
What?
You've selected Full Disclosure Now. If this is correct, press 1. Why don't you just tell me the name of the conference you'd like to attend? Rebels of Disclosure? To find the venue nearest you, please enter your 5-digit zip code now. Why don't you just tell me where you want to attend the conference? Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center? Rebels of Disclosure is playing at the Pierre Marquette Lodge and Conference Center in Grafton, Illinois, May 12th through 15th, 2025.
Yeah, now I got you.
If you would like to purchase tickets, please visit JourneyToTruth.online now.